Hello, I am Irina Stahl. I'm a researcher at the Institute of Sociology, Romanian Academy, and the secretary of the Ritual Year Working Group from the International Society of Ethnology and Folklore. Today, I'm going to talk about restrictions on religious rituals during the COVID-19 pandemic in Romania and the questions they raised. To begin with, here is the time frame of events in Romania. The state of emergency was declared from the 16th of March until the 14th of May, so for 2 months. On the 18th of March, churches, although they remained open, were not allowed to receive any public, so the services were ongoing but only in the presence of the clergy without public. On the 24th of March, Romania entered a lockdown, which lasted until the 14th of May. People were allowed to leave their home under specific conditions. They had to have a travel declaration on them, and you see it on the right side of your screen, which had to be signed and dated, and they had to mention their destination in it and the motives why they left their home. The church attendance was not among these pre-established motives. On the 15th of May, Romania entered a state of alert. So restrictions were raised little by little and people started to relax. From the 15th of May until the 1st of June, it was still required to have a travel declaration if you left the city or the town. On the 26th of February, Romania had its first recorded COVID-19 case. The very next day, on the 27th of February, the Patriarch released a statement called Sanitary and Spiritual Measures in Time of Pandemic. And in it was said that the person who feels fearful may ask the priest to receive Eucharist from his own spoon, brought from home for this occasion. The person who feels fearful may temporarily avoid kissing the icons within the church and choose to kiss the icons within his or her own home instead. And this was the beginning of a big controversy because the press interpret the text in not exactly in the spirit of the church. The same day, on the 27th of February, the Roman Catholic Church also issued a press release with similar recommendations. It was mentioned that people should avoid using holy water to mark the sign of the cross, they should avoid shaking hands in service, and they should avoid kissing or touching the reliquary. And although I'm not going to talk about Roman Catholic Church in this presentation, I thought it was interesting that both Roman Catholic and Orthodox Church made a press release the same day. The next day, on the 28th of February, the Romanian Patriarchate released a new press release intitulated Pastoral Words to Strengthen the Faith and the Eucharistic Communion, in which it was mentioned that the special measures mentioned one day earlier referred only to those whose faith is weak, and this is a citation from the Bible. The Saint Eucharist is not and can never be a source of illness and death, but a source of new life into Christ, a source of forgiveness of sins, of healing of the soul and the body. It was also clearly stated that the rule of offering communion to the clergy and the faithful from the same Saint Chalice remain unchanged. The priest will explain to all faithful that this communion has never been a danger for anyone and will therefore not be a danger for them either. On the 11th of March, the Romanian Patriarchate sent a special prayer for the cessation of the COVID-19 pandemic to all priests in all parishes around the country. On the 12th, between the 12th and the 15th of March, more recommendations to the priests followed. They were required to organize hygienic spaces with disinfectant at the entrance of the church, to avoid crowding and only allowed a maximum of 15 people inside the churches, to use loudspeakers if necessary, and to keep churches open every day, especially to avoid crowding. Reading of the special prayer for the cessation of the COVID-19 pandemic was required at the end of each service, and priests were also asked to follow the recommendations released by the Ministry of Health and cooperate with state authorities. On the 16th of March, as I said, the emergency state started. On the 18th of March, the churches remained open, services were still allowed, but in the absence of people. On the 22nd of March, after consultation with the Minister of Internal Affairs, the Holy Synod released new measures regarding the religious service and churchly social work. In it was stated that the religious services will be held without public and can be filmed and broadcast online, on TV or on radio. Exceptions were made for baptism, weddings, funerals, for which a number of 8 people were allowed to attend. Faithful were advised to arrange a prayer space in their home with icons, candle, oil candle, Bibles or other religious books, and to make a spiritual schedule for the following weeks together with their confessor. Faithful were also advised to keep in touch with their confessor and to ask him to come to their home or to the hospital if needed. The service of the Holy Common Unction was suspended. Instead, the faithful were recommended to read the prayer of several healing saints on Wednesdays and Fridays. All faithful are advised to stay in their homes and to leave them for emergency situations only. Life and health are gifts from God, and we have the duty to protect and cultivate them with permanent responsibility. Now, before and after lockdown, a research company called IRES made several surveys. From this particular service that they made between the 21st and 24th of March, we find out that 93% of the people who were interviewed said that they pray. 28% of the people said that they pray more often now, and 62% of the people say that they pray as frequently as usual. I remind you that the churches were already closed at this date. People were asked if they attended church in the past 7 days, and 12% of them said that they did, even if churches were closed on the 18th. 43% of them said that they only went for Sunday Mass, 36% said that they went during the week, and 17% said that they went for the Sunday Mass and also during the week in other contexts. 14% of people had talked with their priest or their confessor about the pandemic, and interesting enough, these people were usually men aged from 51 to 65 with lower education and living in rural environment. 27% of the people, mostly women and over age of 51, said that they respected Lent. Now, if we compare that to other studies that IRES made earlier, we find out that from 2015 studies that 95% of Romanians were praying. So if we compare that with the 93% that we got in this 2020 study, the difference is not great. So it's pretty much the same percentage. The figures are close. From the IRES 2015, we also find out that 22% of people were going to church weekly. So if we compare it to people who had been to church in the past 7 days in 2020, we see that the percentage is slightly lower, but it's not surprising considering that the churches were already closed by then. In 2020, 27% of people were respecting Lent. In 2012, 10% of Romanians were respecting the entire period of Lent. Now also 50% in addition mentioned that they were only respecting a few days of Lent a week. If we look at the church attendance before and after the closing of churches, we don't see a big difference. We have an IRES research made before the closure of churches to the public from the 16th to the 17th of March, in which 49% of people admitted they had been to a public space in the past 3 days. Out of these 49, 3% went to church. Again, they are mostly elderly women with low education and from the rural environment. During the closure to the public, in the first days, from the 21st to the 24th of April, 39% of the people admitted they had been out into a public space in the past 3 days. Out of these, 3.3% went to church. In the last 2 days of the lockdown, 2% of the people said the first thing they will do after the lockdown will be raised is to go to church. Now, during the pandemic, many processions with holy relics and icons were held all over the country. I counted over 20 processions in all the regions, and their purpose were mainly to ward off the plague and to stop the drought, because at the same time that we were confronted with the first cases of COVID-19, we Romania also had a drought. These processions were performed with minimum number of clergy in the absence of faithful, and the relics and the icons were transported with automobiles, which was really unusual and without precedent. Another interesting fact worth mentioning is the fact that on the 6th of April, 100 psalm singers prayed together in the virtual reality to the Holy Mother of God. And these posts that they put on their Facebook was seen by 12,000 people in only a few hours. And what's interesting is that in this way, the spirit of singing together was translated into the virtual reality. On the 8th of April, the Church released a guidance regarding Palm Sunday, Holy Week, and the Holy Easter. So Easter was approaching, and these guidance were telling priests how to approach the events. Palm Sunday procession was cancelled. Parish volunteers were supposed to take willow tree branches to faithful to their home. Confession and communion would only take place in people's home or in hospital. The holy bread, in Romanian called Paști, was to be blessed on Great Thursday, 16th of April, and then be packed in closed packages. It would be given to people on Friday and Saturday in special places outside of the church. All services were supposed to be held as usual without any change in the absence of public. At midnight on Saturday evening, all bells were supposed to ring. The faithful were advised to light a candle and open a window or go out on their balcony to address the salute, "Christ is risen," however, without disturbing their neighbors. And the holy light were to be brought from Jerusalem on April 18th. On the 14th of April, an agreement between the Romanian Orthodox Church and the Ministry of Internal Affairs was signed regarding the celebration of Easter. In it was stated that the holy bread, so in Romanian the Paști, will be given to people on Friday, 17th of April, and Saturday, 18th of April, between 7 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon, in special places outside of the church. In their declaration, people who wanted to go and get it had to mention going to get the holy bread for this or that church. The holy light was to be distributed by parish volunteers as well as public order crews and police patrols in mission. Priests and volunteers were granted free passage on Resurrection Night in order to distribute the holy light to parishioners. Now, the next day, on the 15th of April, President Iohannis held a speech in which he criticized the agreement between the Orthodox Church and the Minister of Internal Affairs. And at the end of his statement, he said, "Dear Romanians, stay at home, or else after the holiday we will have to organize funerals." Well, the very day in the evening, the agreement was changed. What was changed? The fact that the holy bread would be distributed by volunteers and clergy and not longer being available in churches. So people were not allowed to leave their house to come and get the holy bread, but this will instead be brought to them by volunteers and the clergy on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday on request. Now, to realize how important this holy Easter bread is for Romanian, we have the figures from an earlier 2012 IRES research, who said that 79% of Romanians went to church for Easter to receive this holy bread. So the fact that they couldn't go to church was pretty important and was quite a restriction for them. The holy light was to be distributed on Saturday evening, again by volunteers and the clergy. The priests and volunteers will be granted free passage in order to be on Resurrection Night in order to do these actions. The police and the auxiliary forces will only distribute the light in hospitals and quarantine centers. During the Holy Week, services were transmitted and broadcasted on the internet and on several TV stations. There were local services held in the Patriarchal Cathedral, but also in Jerusalem. On the 18th of April, the Holy Light service was from Jerusalem in the Church of the Holy Grave was broadcasted live in Romania on TV and on the internet. And here we have a few pictures with the Patriarch of Jerusalem taking out the Holy Light from the Holy Grave and showing it to the world. The same day, on the 18th of April in the evening, the light arrived in Romania, brought over by a special military aircraft. Diocese delegates wearing gloves and protection masks came to the airport to receive the light and distribute it in their parishes. On the 18th of April, the resurrection service was followed on TV by most of the people, or on the internet. There were live transmissions. And to realize what an impact this restriction had on people, we can go back to the IRES survey from 2012, in which 84% of Romanians declared participating at the resurrection midnight service in church. And 99% of them declared they celebrated Easter. So the fact that they could not go to church that evening and they could not spend Easter Day the next day with their family was quite a big deal for Romanians. So the several TV channels on the 18th of April broadcasted the service from the Patriarchal Cathedral. In his speech, the Patriarch said with the occasion, "The Holy Light is a gift of God, who brings us comfort. Jesus sent us the light of his resurrection, entering thus in our homes and in our hearts, in order to bring light into our incertitude, to disperse the fear, and to help us heal in body and mind. Through the holy light, we all were once more in communion with all Orthodox churches and with all our faithful. So here we see highlighted the importance of the holy light brought from Jerusalem. This light kept us in communion. I want to mention that the holy light was brought for the first time from Jerusalem in 2009 in Romania, and ever since it is brought over each year. Now, from each parish, volunteers brought the lights to people who asked for it. And this is a picture who was awarded the picture of the week by The Guardian, and it is a picture taken in one of the parishes in Bucharest. And in it you can see a volunteer wearing special protection and gloves and a mask, taking these lighted candles to people in the parish. And here are two pictures that I received from a colleague from Iași, with candles left at the entry of buildings. And on the left side, the note next to the light says, "The parish of St. Mina has left this light for parishioners from this building. God bless you." And on the right side, you only have a holy light mentioned. Myself, I received the holy light from a neighbor the second day of Easter. Now, beside rituals during lockdowns, the relation confessor faithful had to adapt. And instead of having discussions face to face, these meetings went online. And here you have Bishop Silwan of Italy talking with children on Zoom and YouTube. Now, on May 9th, the National Institute of Public Health published a series of measures to be applied once the emergency state is raised. The specialists recommended open-air services, restricted access to the inside of the church, clergy and faithful should wear masks and use hand sanitizer, the churches should periodically be cleaned, the door handles, religious items, icons, and various surfaces should be wiped every 4 hours with disinfectant. People should avoid touching and kissing sacred items, and they should choose to kneel and bow instead. Blessing should be given by the priest from a distance, and people should avoid giving and receiving Eucharist if disposable spoons and cups were not available. And actually it is only this last point that raised issues. The Romanian Orthodox Church responded immediately, saying that reopening of churches is part of the natural process of returning to the necessary rhythms of the profound social, the religious dimension of life being essential. But at the same time, the Church was very prone to highlight that the Holy Eucharist and the Holy Communion belong exclusively to the Church. The Church therefore decided to postpone the common Holy Communion until it consults the other Orthodox churches in order to reach a common decision. The 14th of May, the Romanian Patriarchate issued churchly guidance for the alert state, in which most of the recommendations given by the National Institute of Public Health were followed and detailed. So services were to be held outdoors, The number of priests, deacons, sacristans, and singers was reduced. The faithful were advised to avoid kissing icons, relics, or the hand of the clergy, and advised to kneel or bow their head in sign of respect instead. The church personnel serving the religious shop were to wear gloves and masks and had to be separated from the public through a plastic wall. Confession and the reading of special prayers had to be scheduled in advance. The priest and the confessor were to be left alone in the church, and they were not to be touched. They were to keep a 2-meter physical distance between them. Baptism, weddings, and funerals could be held with 16 people maximum present. So now, the only exceptions and the only rules in which the church changed or added to the recommendations given by the specialists, by the doctors, were the following. The clergy involved in the service, in praying, singing, or preaching, will not wear a mask, said the text issued by the Patriarchate. And then we have the issue of the Eucharist. To give strength to its decision, the Church consulted the Holy Synod and decided to postpone the decision regarding Eucharist until after the 1st of June in order to reach a common decision with the other Orthodox churches. However, the individual communion remained in place and could be used. Now, on the 15th of May, the country entered the state of alert, and the first relaxation measures were implemented. And here we have a few pictures of the first Holy Liturgy held outside of the Patriarchal Cathedral after lockdown on the 15th of May. You can see people wearing masks, and the holy bread, the sacramental bread, given away in individual bags. On the 15th of May, so the same day, the first day after lockdown, the Archbishop of Tomis, Theodosie, offered Eucharist with the same spoon from the same chalice to several children. New controversy, unfortunately, arose. The immediate reaction of the Church, of the Orthodox Church, was to deplore the ostentation of the act, despite the recommendations issued by the Holy Synod and the Patriarch. The spokesman of the Archbishopric, however, said that no churchly law has been broken, that the Archbishop could not disappoint the faithful, keeping them away from the Holy Chalice. And to make things worse, he also announced the intention of the Archbishop to repeat the resurrection service after the example of the Greek Orthodox Church. So, in the night of the 26th to the 27th of May, the resurrection service was repeated in Constanța, which is a city on the southeast coast of the Black Sea in Romania. And the service was held by Archbishop Theodosie himself. Of course, it was highly visible in the media. All the local TV chains and national TV chains were there to watch what was happening. Now, theologians pointed out a couple of changes to the ritual. The Archbishop addressed the audience with a specific call, "Come to receive the light," repeated 3 times, which can only be addressed once, and that is during the resurrection night, which the Patriarchate highlighted had been held initially. So by repeating it meant that the Archbishop brought a change to the ritual. He also imposed an additional 3 days of fasting to those who wanted to receive the Eucharist, a period of fasting that was not mentioned in the calendar. Once more, the hierarch offered the Eucharist with the same spoon from the same chalice. So we finally arrived to June, when on the 16th, after the governmental session, the Prime Minister announced new relaxation measures, among which the reopening of churches. The next day, on the 17th of June, the Romanian Orthodox Church issued new churchly guidance, in which one of the measures, the other ones are pretty much the same as before, was the fact that a 2-meter physical distance had to be kept between faithful. If there were too many people attending the service, some of them could listen to the liturgy outside of the church, or the priest could take the decision to have the service outdoors. This past Sunday, on the 21st of June, the churches were reopened to the public, and the first liturgy with public could be held inside of the churches. Now, what is interesting is to see how people hold on during these past few months. How did they perceive this period of time in which they were not able to attend church? How did faithful perceive these difficult times? And Basilica News, which is the news Basilica, which is the news agency of the Patriarchate, addressed people a question on their Facebook page. They asked them to resume, in one word, the life of the church during the pandemic. And the results they received are really amazing. They received almost 1,000 comments in only one day. And from these comments, they made a word cloud based on word frequency. And here you have the cloud. In dark blue, you have the most frequent words, and the lighter the words get, the less frequent they are. So what you see are the most frequent words used by people. And if we interpret these words, using a Q-sort methodology to determine the thematic clusters, we find the following five themes. And the order of these themes was determined by frequency values. So the 5 themes are personal sacrifice, self-examination, good behavior, faith, and service to others, in this specific order. And next to them, you can see the words people used to describe these themes. Using these keywords, we get to a description and a process of the time spent during the pandemic by faithful. This is how we can resume it. Restrictions led to personal sacrifices requiring changes. The time of restrictions was a test involving pain and suffering. The restrictions were seen as their cross to carry in their fight against this disease. It was a test of their faith. The personal sacrifices were accompanied by a renewed sense of self through self-examination by means of introspection, prayer, asceticism, and confession. The self-examination improved personal good behavior as individuals acted with humility in the face of the virus. They were obedient, patient, and conducted themselves well. Their religious belief gave them hope as they trusted that this disease would pass over them and others who were faithful. Their faith was revealed in their dedication to their beliefs as witnessed by philanthropic acts of mercy and charity and love of others. If you notice, the question was addressed about the church. So it was described the life of the church during the pandemic, but people still talked about their own personal experience. Now, a few conclusions. Since the first case of COVID-19 in Romania, the Romanian Orthodox Church has closely cooperated with the authorities. It has taken special measures to reduce the impact of the virus and protect the population, even if this meant to keep the faithful away from the church. It has also had an active role in supporting the faithful and the entire population in these times of need through donations, volunteer work, spiritual advice, healing prayers, and rituals. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a great impact on religious rituals in Romania because of the special safety measures that were taken. The Romanian Orthodox Church has respected all the suggestions given by the public authorities, with only one exception, referring to the Eucharist, which was the main topic of discussion since the beginning of the pandemic. So what about the Eucharist, or the Holy Communion, as it is called? In fact, the discussion only refers to the group Eucharist given to the participants in the liturgy. The individual Eucharist, given usually after confession, has continued to be performed. The issue of the sacramental bread seems to have been solved with the individual packaging applied for the holy bread for Easter called Paști. The sacramental wine given from the same chalice with the same spoon to more than one person is the only one to have raised an issue. Refusing to use the disposable spoons, the Romanian Orthodox Church has decided to postpone the offering of the common Eucharist until a common resolution will be taken in agreement with the other Orthodox churches. Now, this is not the first time the Eucharist has been postponed in Romania. In 1829, for instance, Bucharest was infested with plague, and the Eucharist was suspended for 2 months. Thus, from a historical perspective, COVID-19 is just one more plague Christianity has to face. Orthodox Church's solutions vary from conservative in Russia and Georgia, which maintain the common Eucharist, to more liberal, like those performed in Finland, which uses disposable spoons. The Romanian Orthodox Church is situated somewhere in the middle, in the direction indicated by the Ecumenical Patriarchate and the Greek Church. And this was the end of my presentation. Thank you all for listening.